Hello everyone, hello everybody. Trust you're all doing well. Good to see you again, good to have you here again. Thank you so much for stopping by to watch this. For those who have never seen any of my videos, big welcome. God bless you for being here. Again, for those who haven't watched any of my videos, just to let you know that I'm doing this video as instructed by the Lord for people who do not believe in God. Yes, that is the main target audience for these videos. People who kind of need convincing from a human perspective, from another human being, right? And I'm basically just sharing my experiences, my encounters with God, and helping you see that indeed there is a God. There is a God who wants you to know him, right? Who wants to walk with you, who wants you to come into a relationship with him. So you can check out my other videos. My very first video, I spoke about my main encounter with the Lord, and I've shared, quite a number of encounters since that first video. And in my last video, I was sharing about how I had been miraculously posted to a location of my desire for a program that I ordinarily cannot influence, right? If you find my last video, you'll get the full story about that. What I didn't mention in my last video was the reason why I really wanted to be posted to that location was, because I had said to God that I was just a new Christian at the time when that posting was going to happen. And I said to God, I was like, God, if I get sent to a location that I don't know anybody, I don't have a community, I don't know, I don't have any Christian community, how would I thrive in my Christian walk? I need to go somewhere where I would be grounded in you, where I would be grounded in the faith, right? And even though there were opportunities to influence that placement, I refused to do that in the natural. And I said, if you are God and you are great, and in fact, he said to me that I shouldn't influence it, right? There were opportunities. I was sitting down next to someone who I could have just, said the word to, and she would have put in a word for me with her father, who had, some influence in that organization that could have influenced that placement. But I think the Spirit of God did not let me say anything to her. Okay, so I just brought back that story to mention that the main purpose why I wanted to remain in the location where I lived to do that placement was because I did not want to get sent somewhere that I would have to start like from scratch, trying to build a Christian community, a community of other believers that I could, relate with and fellowship with, right? So as God would have it, I got posted to my location of choice. And I believe that I had mentioned, I'm not sure if I had mentioned in my previous videos, I don't think I have, but before I had left university, sorry, for these stories to connect, you may need to watch the previous videos. Yeah, I try to keep my videos under 20 minutes, 15-20 minutes, so I may not be able to tell all of that story again. But before I had left university, I would pray. I think I was in uni maybe about for a month or two after I started working with God, before I graduated. So in those couple of weeks while I was in school, I would really pray about where I would go and serve, where I would serve as a Christian. I plan to share stories about, my jobs, because I had said that in the last video. I plan to share stories about, the miraculous jobs I came in through by the Spirit of God alone. But I am somewhat digressing here. Okay, please forgive me. So this has just come to me, so I'm just going to share it. So I would pray about where, the church I would go to. I would say to God, I would say, you know what, Lord, I don't just want to go to any church just because it's a church. I don't want to go back to the church I was in to just go and warm the pews of the church. I want you to send me somewhere I could serve, somewhere I would serve you, right? And so that would just be my constant cry to God. And that's why, I would say to God that you need to send me to a location where I would not have to, I don't know anybody, I don't know anywhere. And that was why I desired to get sent back to the city where I lived. Anyway, from my last video, you know that I was sent to the city where I lived. But one of those days when I was praying, as I was praying, I saw something that you would probably call a trance, because I actually saw this as I was praying. Even I was wide awake, my eyes were shut, but I saw a choir singing, and I saw a particular pastor, right? And I knew that the Spirit of God was leading me to that church and to go and serve with the choir. Now, let me give you background story about, being in the choir. So when I was in high school, which I had mentioned in one of my past videos, I would normally so when I got into high school, I think the older kids who were Christians then sort of found out that, oh, this child that just came into secondary school, it would be from grade 7 here in Canada. So yes, we had grade 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 6 years, yes. So I get into grade 7, and I have what we call school mothers in those days. So it's basically a senior student who would take care of the younger ones. So my school mother, led me to the Lord, right? I know I had mentioned in my previous videos, please go and watch for it to connect. She had led me to the Lord, and somehow they probably heard me singing and heard that, oh, this person has a good voice, right? And they just, made me join the choir at that time. And they would actually, little girl me, they would actually give me lead roles to sing. Now, I must confess that at that time, I had never really done, I didn't even know how to sing, in my own opinion. For them, it was just that, oh, she had a good voice, so let her sing, right? So I did that. I did that for about 2 or 3 years when I was in junior secondary, before I lost my dad, and then I fell away. The stories in my previous videos, right? So when I had this encounter in university, one day I went to a midweek service. I think it was the very next week. I had gone to church. So I had my first encounter on a Monday. If I remember clearly, it was a Monday. I was so looking forward to going to church on Sunday. I went to church on Sunday. It was glorious. They announced that they had midweek services. And so I was looking forward to go to the midweek service on Wednesday. And so I go to midweek service Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday. And when it was time for the praise and worship session to go on, there was no choir member in the church. Nobody from the choir to lead praise and worship. And out of the blue, the pastor just pointed to me and said, you come forward and lead praise and worship. I was in shock, like, how? But I could not say no to the pastor. And I got up, I did what I could do, and I went and I sat down, right? In fact, the following week, the pastor referred to it, and he was preaching about fanning into flame the gift that God has put in you. And that is a scripture that you can find in the Bible for those who do not know, scriptures from the Bible yet. Right? The Bible talks about fanning into flame the gift that God has put into you. So he was saying, oh, like this sister last week, we called her to come and, lead praise and worship. And anyway, so here I was praying to God, send me somewhere I must serve. I didn't know what service would look like. I just knew that I had to serve in some capacity. That was just my heart's cry to God, right? So one of those days I'm praying, I see a large choir in robes. I think it was purple and black robes or something like that they were wearing. I know there was purple. I saw purple robes. And then I saw the pastor. He looked familiar, like somebody I knew, right? And so when I go back to Lagos, eventually before I go back, home, I get to realize that, okay, this is the pastor and this is the church where he pastors. And then I find where they are located quite far away from where I lived. I would have to get into like just two buses, not like the buses we have in Canada, but two buses to get to that location. I found that out when I got home and asked my younger brother, who apparently schools in the area where the church is. So I asked, oh, this church, do you know the church? He said yes. And in fact, and then he said yes. He told me how to get there. But that week I got home, my older brother had invited me to his own church, right? And I thought, oh, okay, that's great. My brother has a car. Since he's going to church, I can always just go to church with him. Just jump in his car instead of taking buses to this church that I don't even know where it is yet, right? So I go to church with my brother that Wednesday, the Wednesday of the week that I land in Lagos. And somewhere in my heart, I'm thinking, okay, I'll check out the choir. Maybe I can join that choir instead of, going to look for this place that I have no clue. I don't know anybody there. I have no clue where it is. I have to go searching for it. But when I go for that service and, I'm trying to connect with what's happening there and with the choir, it just wasn't happening. It just wasn't happening. So in my head, I thought, oh, just on Sunday morning, get into your brother's car. He drives you to church. You are good. That was not to be. Sunday morning, I knew I had to go and look for that church that I saw when I was praying back in uni. So I get up, I take the first bus to where I was going to catch the second bus. When I get to where I'm going to catch the second bus, I see a very old friend of mine from elementary school, primary school, we call it back, then. Very old friend of mine, and we get chatting, and she was like, oh, where are you going? I said, oh, I'm going to church. What church? I tell her the name of the church. I was like, oh, that's my church. I was like, oh, wow, fantastic. Are you going to church? She said, no, she's not going to church. She's going for a trade fair, but it's just the trade fair was happening just around the church. I was like, oh, really? Okay, I'm going to church though. And she was like, oh, you're too late. By now, you won't even get into the main auditorium. You'll be in the overflow. They will put you in a smaller hall in the overflow. I said, well, no problem. Let me just go. I know I have to be in church. She was like, okay, that's fine. That she'll show me where I had to get off, right? She was going a little further from where I had to get off. So when we got to where I had to get off, she told me, well, this is where you're getting off, and that's the church building right there. And I walked towards the building, and true to her words, the main hall was full and I was being directed to the overflow. And then as I entered the hall of the overflow and I look up, there's a screen, right? And I see a lady who I now know is the pastor's wife. She was on the screen and she was making an announcement, right? And she was, announcing and saying, oh, so, if you know that the Lord has blessed you with a good voice, this is your opportunity to join the mega choir. We need people to join the mega choir. If God has blessed you with a good voice, please find the music director and, ask them what you need to do. And honestly, I was walking in as she was saying this. I could see her on the screen as she was talking. I froze in my tracks because I couldn't believe that was happening. As I was walking in, she was announcing for people to join the choir, that they needed people. Let me tell you something about this choir that I was able to join that day, because after the service, I went to the main auditorium, looked for the person I had to look for, and I, surrendered myself to say, I need to join the choir. Ordinarily, this choir would, have you go through an audition, right? That is how you normally get into this choir I'm talking about. Now, this choir has so many known recording artists, both in the country of Nigeria and internationally. If I mention a few names, I just need to mention 2 or 3 names, right? And a lot of people would know them. Ordinarily, I should have gone through an audition, which, trust me, I would have failed woefully if I was put through that audition, right? Because remember, I said, yes, I know God has blessed me with a good voice, but I did not really know how to sing. 2 different things I've come to realize, right? In fact, now I'm still not great at singing, but I'm learning, trying to learn the ropes here and there. But I know that if not for the need at that point in time, there is no way I would have been a part of that choir at that time. But God had directed me to go there at that point in time because He had seen my heart for service, and He created that opportunity. And I went into that choir. We had there was a mega fest or mega conference coming up. I was part of that. I stayed in that choir for 8 months, and the Lord moved me on to something else, which I will talk about, at some point in time. But I just want you to think about what happened with me on that day. I don't believe it was a coincidence. It could not have been a coincidence. By the way, when the choir came up to minister, they were actually wearing black suits. The ladies were in black jackets and skirts. The guys were in black trousers, pants, and suits. And I was like, okay, this is not the choir. I don't know. Is it the same choir? It was definitely the same pastor. But guess what? When I came to church next Sunday, the choir sure was in robes. Purple, the robes I saw, that was actually what they were wearing the next week. And yes, we wore robes a lot to minister. We wore robes, maybe we wore suits maybe once every 6 to 8 weeks, but most of the time we wore robes to minister, right? So yes, that was not a coincidence that I walked in at the time when the need for voices was being announced. So I'm hoping that somebody will hear the story and think about it. Could that have been a coincidence? I don't think so. So many other stories I've shared in my previous videos. Not coincidences. The Spirit of God at work. And I'm going to share many more. There is so much more. So much more, so many more. I have a lot more I'm going to share. So my next video will actually, I would connect this conference that I just mentioned and the first job I got as a graduate. I will, put it together, and yes, hopefully, you'll see how that there is a God out there that really, really cares for us. really cares for you. Again, I'm going to keep this video under 20 minutes. Thank you so much for watching. If you need to connect with me, please watch my previous videos. My email address is in those videos. I hope to hear from that person who is really searching for God. God richly bless you. Hallelujah.